Every night, the maid gave herself to the lonely millionaire, until one day. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Clara had been working as a maid in the luxurious mansion for a little over a year. Every night, she quietly did her work, making sure that everything was in order for Mr. James, the lonely millionaire who lived there. He had become more than just a boss to her. He was a man trapped in his own silence, someone who had shut himself off from the world. Each night, Clara would stay until the late hours, cleaning, tidying up, and simply being there in the house. Her presence a quiet comfort for the man who seemed to have everything but peace. James was a man who had lost his family in an accident years ago, and ever since, he had withdrawn from life, avoiding social events, and preferring the cold, empty walls of his mansion. He rarely spoke, except for the occasional brief exchange with his staff. He was a man of few words, his eyes always carrying a heavy weight, as though he was burdened with the memories of a past he couldn't escape. Clara had learned to be quiet in his presence, her words few and far between. She never pried into his past, but she could see the sadness in his eyes. She knew he needed someone, but he refused to admit it. Most nights, after she had finished her chores, she would linger in the hallway outside his study, just to make sure he was okay, just to be there in case he needed something, even if he never asked. It had become a routine, one that Clara had grown used to, the quiet hum of the house, the soft shuffle of her slippers as she moved from room to room. She had never expected anything to change. But one night, as she was about to leave, she stopped in the doorway of James's study, unsure whether to say goodbye or simply slip away as usual. She was tired, both physically and emotionally. There were moments when she wanted to reach out, to ask if he was okay, but she didn't. She couldn't. That was the line she had drawn, the unspoken agreement between them. But tonight was different. As she stood there, James looked up from his desk, his eyes meeting hers. He said nothing, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she saw a glimmer of something in his gaze. Something human, something warm. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. He wasn't saying anything, but his expression had changed. And for a brief moment, she felt a connection, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this man who had always been so distant might be starting to let go of his past. It was in that moment that Clara realized, for the first time, that she wasn't just a maid to him. She was someone who had become a part of his life, someone who mattered. But Clara wasn't sure if he had even realized it yet. The next morning, as she prepared to leave for the day, she couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on her, the way he had looked at her like she was someone he could rely on. She had always been there for him, but maybe now, just maybe, he was starting to see her too. The following days seemed to blur together, each one passing quietly like the last. Clara continued her routine, cleaning the mansion, taking care of the small tasks that were required of her, but something had changed. James had begun to speak to her more. Not much, but enough for Clara to feel like maybe he was opening up, just a little. Each time she entered his study, she noticed him looking at her differently, as though he was seeing her for the first time. He no longer sat in complete silence while she worked, and sometimes, he even asked how her day was going. These were small moments, but to Clara, they meant everything. She had never expected to be more than just an employee in his eyes. She had always kept a distance, knowing her place, but lately, she felt like he was starting to see her in a way that went beyond the duties of a maid. One evening, as Clara was finishing her chores, she noticed James staring out of the window, his face unreadable. She hesitated before speaking, unsure if she should disturb him. But something inside her urged her to say something. "It's a beautiful evening," she said, her voice soft. He turned slowly, his expression softening just slightly. "Yes, it is," he replied quietly. There was a long pause, and Clara wondered if he would say more. But instead, he simply nodded and went back to looking outside. Clara felt a pang of disappointment, but she understood. He wasn't ready yet. She wasn't sure if he ever would be. The next day, Clara arrived early to begin her work, but as she entered the living room, She was surprised to find James sitting at the large, ornate table, papers spread out in front of him. It was unusual for him to be awake this early, and even more unusual for him to be working. She approached him cautiously. "Mr. James?" she called softly. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an unreadable expression. "I didn't expect you to be here so early," she said, her voice faltering slightly. James motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit with me, Clara," he said, surprising her even more. Clara hesitated, then sat down across from him. She wasn't sure what was happening, but something in his tone told her this moment was different. "I've been thinking," James began, his voice quieter than usual. "I don't know why, but you've been here for me, day after day. You've seen me at my worst, and you haven't turned away. I can't ignore that anymore." Clara's heart raced as she listened to him speak. She had never heard him say anything like this before. "You've given me something I didn't even know I needed," he continued. "I'm not used to having someone care, someone who doesn't expect anything in return. I've been selfish, but I don't want to be that person anymore." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known that James was a good man deep down, despite the walls he had built around himself. But hearing him speak so openly made her feel like she was seeing him for the first time. "I don't know what this means yet, Clara," James said, his gaze softening. "But I do know that I'm starting to feel something for you." Clara didn't know how to respond. Her heart was racing, her thoughts swirling, but in that moment, all she could do was nod. She didn't have to say anything because she knew, deep down, that this was the beginning of something new. For the first time in a long while, Clara allowed herself to feel the hope that had been dormant inside her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new chapter for both of them. The days that followed were filled with a strange new energy between Clara and James. It wasn't obvious at first, but Clara could feel it, like the air had shifted around them. The small conversations they shared became more frequent, less forced. She no longer felt like just a maid. She felt like someone who mattered, someone who was seen. And that feeling, no matter how fleeting, made her heart swell. James, on the other hand, seemed to be changing too. He wasn't as distant as before. He would smile more often, even if it was just a small, fleeting curve of his lips. He would look her in the eyes when they spoke, something he had never done before. Clara found herself looking forward to those moments, however brief they were. One evening, as she was finishing up in the kitchen, James walked in, holding a glass of whiskey in his hand. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a thoughtful expression. "You're still working?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "I'm just cleaning up," Clara replied, glancing up from the sink. "You don't need to stay so late. You've been working hard for days now." James's words caught her off guard. She had always stayed late, cleaning up after everyone, never thinking twice about it. But hearing him say this, hearing the concern in his voice, made her pause. "I'm used to it," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. James studied her for a moment, then walked over to her, placing the glass down on the counter. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, his voice a little hesitant. "You don't have to work yourself to the bone. I don't want you to feel like you have to do everything here." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but he raised his hand to stop her. "I appreciate everything you've done for me," he continued. "I know I haven't been the easiest person to be around, but I'm trying. I want you to know that." Clara felt a wave of warmth rush over her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly appreciated. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The next few days, James continued to show small signs of change. He started to make more of an effort, even helping her with some of the household tasks. They would work together, silently, side by side, and it felt natural. No longer was there an invisible barrier between them. Slowly, they began to build a connection, a friendship that neither of them had expected. It wasn't love yet, not in the way Clara had always dreamed of, but it was something real, something that made her heart flutter with hope. One evening, as they sat in the living room after dinner, James turned to her, his face serious. "Clara, I want you to know," he began, "that I don't know how to say this, but I've been thinking about you. About us." His words were unexpected, and Clara felt her heart race. She had hoped for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to say. James took a deep breath, his eyes not leaving hers. "I know this might sound crazy," he said quietly, "but I think I'm starting to care about you. More than just a maid. More than just someone who works for me." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had been waiting for this moment, but now, hearing the words from him, it felt like everything was falling into place. She couldn't find the words to respond, but she didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. And in that silence, Clara realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something much more than either of them had ever imagined. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Clara and James deepened. It wasn't just about the work anymore, not just about the tasks that needed to be done or the moments of silence they shared. It was about something real, something Clara had never expected to find in this cold, grand mansion. They spent more time together now, often sharing quiet dinners or sitting together by the fireplace. Their conversations, once awkward and stilted, had become easier. They talked about everything, from the mundane details of daily life to the deeper, more personal stories they hadn't yet shared. For the first time in a long time, James laughed, a sound Clara hadn't heard often in the past. And when he did, it was warm, genuine, and it made her heart flutter. One evening, after they finished dinner, Clara was cleaning up the dishes when James stood up suddenly and walked over to her. She looked up, surprised by the movement. "Clara," he began, his voice soft. "There's something I need to tell you." Clara paused, unsure of what he was about to say. "What is it?" she asked, her heart racing. James took a deep breath, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About everything that's happened between us lately. And I know this might sound sudden, but I think I'm falling for you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. Yes, they had grown close, but she never imagined James would feel the same way. She looked at him, her mind racing. She had hoped for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure what to say. James took a step closer to her, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know it's complicated," he continued, "and I know we've come from different worlds, but I can't ignore what I feel anymore." Clara swallowed hard, her emotions swirling. She had been waiting for this, but now, hearing the words, she felt a mixture of joy and fear. "I never thought I would be in this position," James said softly, "but you've made me realize that I'm capable of more than just work and solitude. You've brought something back into my life that I didn't even know was missing." Clara stood still, unsure of what to do. She had always kept a certain distance, knowing her place, but now, everything was changing. She had been waiting for this, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure she was ready. But deep down, she knew she wanted this. She wanted him. "I'm not sure what the future holds," James said, his voice tender, "but I want to find out with you, if you'll have me." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness. "I want that too," she whispered, finally finding her voice. James smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made her heart flutter. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. In that moment, everything felt right. They stood there together, their hands intertwined, and for the first time, Clara felt like she had found something real, something worth holding on to. They didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was filled with unspoken promises, and in that silence, Clara knew that this was only the beginning of their journey together. As the weeks passed, Clara and James settled into a rhythm. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Clara found herself no longer looking at the mansion as just a place she worked. It had become a home, a place where she felt seen, understood, and most importantly, cared for. James, once a man buried in his solitude, was beginning to open up in ways Clara never thought possible. It was in the small moments, when he laughed at one of her jokes, or when he asked how her day had gone, that she felt the walls he had built around himself start to crumble. Their relationship had changed, but it was still delicate, like a flower blooming slowly, unsure if the world was ready for it. Clara had always been the one who took care of others, but now, it was James who was beginning to care for her in ways she hadn't expected. He would surprise her with small gestures, like bringing her favorite coffee or arranging a surprise visit to an art gallery she had been wanting to go to for months. These were things that made her realize he wasn't just a millionaire trying to fill a void with money. He was a man trying to heal, trying to rebuild his life after years of grief. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace, watching the sun set behind the hills, James turned to Clara, his gaze soft and thoughtful. "You've changed everything for me," he said quietly. I don't know how you did it, but you made me feel like I can actually live again. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to hearing him speak so openly. It was always so hard for him to show emotion, but now, it was as if he couldn't stop. I've been living in the past for so long, James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. But you made me realize that there's a future, and I want that future to be with you. Clara's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time, she truly allowed herself to believe in the possibility of their future. I want that too, she replied, her voice trembling. It was a simple statement, but it held so much weight. They didn't need grand gestures or promises. They only needed each other. The night was quiet, the only sound being the distant chirp of crickets and the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. James reached out, taking her hand in his, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Clara felt safe in his presence, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. The next morning, as she was getting ready to leave for the day, she found herself looking at James differently. He had always been the man she worked for, but now he was someone she cared about deeply. He wasn't just a millionaire. He was the man who had shown her kindness when she had least expected it. He was the man who had shared his life with her, and in return, she had shared her heart. She knew it wasn't perfect, and there were still things they needed to work through. But for the first time, she felt like they were moving forward together, not as employer and employee, but as equals. As she walked down the stairs to the kitchen, she found James waiting for her at the door, his usual serious expression replaced with a warm smile. I made breakfast, he said, holding out a plate of eggs and toast. I thought you might like it. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she said, taking the plate from him. This is more than I ever expected. Well, James said with a playful grin. You've given me more than I ever expected, Clara. I think it's about time I start giving back. And in that moment, Clara realized that she wasn't just staying in the mansion anymore. She was building a life, a real one, with someone who truly cared for her. And for the first time, she allowed herself to dream about a future she never thought was possible. As the days went by, Clara found herself falling deeper for James. Their bond had become more than just a connection between an employee and employer. It had blossomed into something real, something meaningful. They spent their evenings together, talking about their hopes, their dreams, and the futures they had once thought were out of reach. James, once closed off and distant, was now sharing parts of his life with Clara he had never shared with anyone. He spoke about his childhood, the loss of his family, and the loneliness that had followed him through the years. Clara listened, her heart breaking for him, but she also felt something stirring inside her. A deep sense of admiration, respect, and love. For the first time, she felt like she was no longer alone in the world. James wasn't just a man she worked for. He had become someone who understood her. One evening, after a quiet dinner, James invited Clara to the study. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the fireplace, casting long shadows on the walls. He stood by the window, looking out at the stars, deep in thought. Clara could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Clara, James began, his voice low and serious. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. Clara's heart skipped a beat. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face her, his gaze intense. I know we've only just begun this journey together, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore. You've changed my life, Clara. You've made me see the world in a way I never thought possible. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Was this really happening? Was he about to say what she hoped he would say? I don't know where this will go, he continued. But I know that I want to find out with you. I want to build a future with you, if you'll have me. Clara's heart raced as she looked into his eyes. She had always been afraid to believe in love, afraid to trust that something real could exist between them. But now, standing here with him, she felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just hope, it was certainty. I want that too, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. With emotion. I've never felt this way before, James. But I know I want to be with you. James smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made Clara's heart swell. He took a step closer to her, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. In that moment, everything felt right. All the fears, the doubts, the uncertainties they had both carried seemed to fade away, leaving only the possibility of what was to come. Then let's start this journey together, James said softly. And with that, Clara knew that their story was just beginning. They weren't two people from different worlds anymore. They were a team, ready to face whatever the future had in store for them, together. As the weeks passed, Clara and James's relationship continued to deepen. They had crossed a line that neither of them had expected, but neither was willing to turn back now. What had started as a professional arrangement had blossomed into something more, something neither of them could ignore. Every day, Clara found herself feeling more and more at home with James, not just in his mansion, but in his life. He had allowed her to see parts of himself that he had kept hidden for years. He was no longer the cold, distant man who had lived alone in his mansion. He was becoming the man she had always believed he could be, someone capable of love, someone who could share his heart with her. And Clara, she was starting to feel something she had never allowed herself to feel before. She was falling in love with him. It wasn't something she had planned, but it was something she couldn't deny. The way he looked at her, the way he cared for her in the small, everyday moments, made her realize that this was real. He wasn't just the man who gave her a job. He was the man who saw her, who valued her, who wanted her. One evening, after a long day of work, James invited Clara to dinner at a restaurant in the city. It wasn't unusual for them to share a meal, but tonight felt different. There was something in the air, something unspoken. As they sat at their table, James looked at her with a quiet intensity. "Clara," he said, his voice low and serious, "there's something I've been thinking about. I've been keeping something from you, and I think it's time I tell you the truth." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had always known there was more to James's story, but hearing him speak like this made her nervous. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. James took a deep breath, his gaze not leaving hers. "I never wanted to burden you with my past," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I think you deserve to know. I've been through a lot, and I've carried that weight with me for so long. I lost everything, my family, my friends, my purpose. I've spent years hiding from it, thinking I could just keep moving forward, but I can't anymore." Clara's heart ached as she listened to him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the vulnerability that he had never shown before. "James," she whispered, reaching across the table to take his hand. "You don't have to carry that weight alone. I'm here for you." James's eyes softened, and for a moment, they sat in silence, simply holding hands. The words he had spoken, the truth he had shared, hung in the air between them. Clara could feel the connection growing stronger, the bond deepening. It wasn't just about the things they had shared or the moments they had spent together. It was about the trust they had built, the honesty they had found with each other. "I want to be with you, Clara," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to build a life with you. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know that I wanted to be with you by my side." Clara felt tears well up in her eyes, but she smiled, her heart full. "I want that too," she said, her voice trembling. "More than anything, I want to be with you." In that moment, everything felt perfect. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure. They were ready to face it together. Clara had found a home in James, not just in his mansion, but in his heart. And James had found something in Clara he hadn't even known he was looking for. They were no longer just two people sharing space. They were partners, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives. And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. This was where she was meant to be. As Clara and James moved forward together, the bond between them grew stronger each day. They were no longer two people from different worlds. They had become a team, supporting each other through every challenge that life threw their way. Clara had once thought she would never find love, that she would always be alone in this world. But now, with James by her side, she felt like she had everything she needed. He was no longer just the man she worked for. He had become her partner, her equal. Every moment spent with him felt like a gift, and she treasured each one. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, James turned to Clara with a thoughtful expression. "You've changed everything for me, Clara," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his emotions. Clara looked at him, her heart full. "You've changed my life too," she replied, her voice trembling. James reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again," he continued, his gaze softening. "I don't just want to live a life with you. I want to build something together. I want us to create a future that we can both be proud of." Clara's heart swelled at his words. She had always dreamed of having a future with someone, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined it would be with James. "I want that too," she whispered. James smiled, a smile full of warmth and affection. It was the smile she had come to love, the one that made her feel like everything was possible. As the days went by, they continued to grow closer, their connection becoming more undeniable. Clara's life, once filled with uncertainty, had blossomed into something beautiful. She was no longer just a maid in James's mansion. She was his partner, his equal. Together, they worked toward building a life that reflected their shared dreams. But even as they embraced the future, there was still one thing James needed to do, something that had been weighing on his mind. He had never fully opened up about his past, and although Clara had come to understand him in many ways, there was still a part of him that he hadn't shared. One night, after dinner, James asked Clara to join him in the living room. The air between them was thick with anticipation. Clara could feel that something important was about to be revealed. "Clara," James began, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "I know I've told you bits and pieces of my past, but there's something I need to say. Something I should have said a long time ago." Clara looked at him, her heart beating faster. She reached out, gently taking his hand. "Whatever it is, James, you can tell me." James took a deep breath, then slowly began to speak. He told Clara about the deep pain he had carried for years, the loss of his family, the guilt that had consumed him, the weight of being alone. "I've been hiding behind this mask," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've pushed people away, convinced myself that I didn't need anyone. But the truth is, Clara, I've needed you all along." Clara's heart ached as she listened to him, her mind racing with the realization that James had been carrying so much pain. She had always seen the strong, silent man he was, but now she saw the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface. "You don't have to carry that burden anymore," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "You're not alone. You have me." James looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe again. The weight of his past didn't disappear overnight, but with Clara by his side, he felt like he could finally move forward. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. "I've never felt this way before. I've never felt like I had someone who truly understood me." Clara smiled softly, her heart full of love for the man sitting next to her. "We're in this together," she said. And in that moment, James knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. As Clara and James continued to build their life together, everything around them seemed to fall into place. The mansion, once a symbol of loneliness and isolation for James, had transformed into a home filled with warmth and laughter. It was no longer just a place to live. It was a reflection of the love and connection they had found in each other. They shared everything now, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. Each day, their bond grew stronger, and with every passing moment, Clara felt more certain that she had found her place in this world, with James by her side. One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, surrounded by the blooming flowers James had planted over the years, James turned to Clara, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, I never thought I'd be here," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd be able to share my life with someone again. But with you, it feels different. It feels like everything is finally falling into place." Clara looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I never thought I could have a future like this, but now, it feels like it's all coming together." James reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I want to make this official," he said, his voice soft but filled with determination. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Clara. You're everything I've been looking for." Clara's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing. She had never expected this moment to come so soon, but now that it was here, she knew she was ready. She had always dreamed of a future filled with love and happiness, but never did she imagine it would be with someone like James. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want that too. I want to be with you always." James smiled, his eyes lighting up with joy. "Then let's make it happen," he said, pulling her into his arms. They stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, surrounded by the beauty of the garden they had nurtured together. It was a perfect moment, a moment that marked the beginning of their future. Over the next few weeks, James and Clara began planning their future together. They talked about their dreams, their goals, and what they wanted from life. James was no longer the closed-off millionaire he had once been. He was now a man full of hope, ready to take on the world with Clara by his side. Their love had grown from something unexpected into something real, something worth fighting for. On a sunny afternoon, as the final preparations for their wedding were underway, James took Clara's hand and led her to the balcony. They stood there, looking out over the landscape, the place they had both come to love. "I never imagined I could be this happy," James said, his voice filled with awe. "And I never imagined I could love someone as much as I love you." Clara smiled, her heart full. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I never thought I would find a love like this, but now I know I've found my home, with you." James kissed her gently, his lips lingering on hers for a moment. As they pulled away, he looked into her eyes with a soft smile. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Our future is ours to create." And with that, they knew that no matter what challenges they would face in the future, they would face them together, as partners, as equals, as two people who had found something extraordinary in each other. They were ready for whatever came next, because they knew they had found their true home in each other.